Now, earlier this week, the public protector, Mkhwebane, was flagged by HSCB, BC International Bank as having financial links to the Guptas. A report indicated she'd received about 70,000 rand from a Gupta-linked company during her time as a diplomat. But she's dismissed the claims as false. Now, First FNB, or First National Bank, is investigating her personal bank account for possible exchange control violations. It's looking at a number of transactions from foreign accounts. The Mail and Guardian has been following this story. Now, joining us to talk about this is Sabelo Skiti from the Mail and Guardian. Sabelo, good morning. Good to have you with us. First, let's talk about the FNB and South African banks. They do they look at everybody's account, firstly. Is this just routine transactions that we're going through? Do they look? This is not just happening because it's a public protector, is what I want to establish, first of all.
No. So how it works basically is that you would have certain mechanisms and certain, systems within banks that pick up, suspicious behavior. So that behavior would probably be like the frequency of payments.
Yep.
It would look at the amounts. If, it's incredibly high amounts, it would also look at lack of clarity of information around the actual transaction. So whether is it being paid by a company that's known, where it's coming from, is the invoices or business, attached to it. And it would be in particular with people that we call politically exposed persons.
Yeah.
So these people are people that are in proximity to power. It would be your politicians, it would be, your captains of industry, it would be basically public figures who, would be susceptible or would be approached by people wanting to move, funds illegitimately.
Yeah. In terms of the Banking Act, what laws could she possibly be violating?
Well, I mean, right now, and I think the nature of everything is that banks, are not allowed to disclose this sort of information. They only report it, to relevant authorities. So it's always difficult to get an understanding of exactly what it is, that was flagged in this particular instance. But what we know about these amounts is that they're coming mainly from Paris, from Brussels, as with the HSBC matter, they're also coming from, Hong Kong and Singapore. So what we've also then, know about them is that it's a couple of $1,000 US at a time. But what we understand is that the bank was actually concerned about the frequency of the payments. We're talking about a period from 2014, to date. So earlier on this year, the bank then made contact with the public protector. Normally, it's just to say, look, we found some suspicious activity in your transactions. They highlight the specific ones. Then they would say to you, would you mind coming in and sort of explaining what's happening here? At the same time, then, a trigger would be sent to the Financial Intelligence Center, which basically would then, take a closer look and seeing, are these things, do we need to then forward it on to the revenue collector, or do we forward it on to law enforcement like the Hawks or whatever to investigate further?
How has the public protector explained these transactions?
So the public protector, firstly, has been quite adamant that there's no communication between her and the bank. So not only HSBC, but she says that she's not been speaking to FNB about it as well. But we're fairly certain, I think, that there is communication, so as far as to know that we've actually know that she asked for an extension, to try and explain, what these transactions are about. But when we put questions to her about particularly Paris and Brussels, she came back and said she's been there on holiday. She would have probably made some purchases, and thus you would have seen a situation where there would have been some rebates. And then she also says she's been receiving money from Indonesia, from in-laws of hers, because her daughter-in-law is in the country. So they would be sending money to the daughter via her accounts.
It's really difficult to see the bank not actually contacting the owner of the account. In a scenario like this, it's almost impossible.
No, look, and I think what is important to note here is that if you remember the case involving former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, when the Guptas were trying to force him to intervene in the impasse with the banks, actually went and released that long list of suspicious transactions that had been with the FIC that possibly led to the banks taking the decisions that they took. Since that has happened, there's been a lot of movement. If you look around, especially the Gupta family, their networks, companies like Trillion, Regiments, they've been unbanked by a number of institutions because of the risks that were associated with carrying these accounts. So banks are actually even more, they place more scrutiny now, knowing that, illicit flows of cash in South Africa is not something that is seldom happens anymore. It's something that happens on a regular. So the banks will do this from time to time, and it would never make sense for them to go to the FIC without going to the account holder first, because the first port of call is to come to you and say, listen, mate, you're getting money from out of the country. It's not clear where the source of the funds is that side.
Yep.
Can you just tell us what this was for? Was it business? Is it a loan? Is it family? Then once you explain, they take it from there.
Sabola, just quickly, there are no links at all at the present moment to the Gupta family, these transactions, or
No.
HSBC as well?
No.
Transaction.
On these ones, there isn't. I know on the HSBC, they said that the flows of the cash I think they suspect could have been, originated from a transaction that involved Gupta families and their people.
Okay. All right. Sabola, thank you so much.